everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am doing a video on units and beats. What they are, when you should use them when preparing scripts, and why they are useful. This is a continuation of my actions video, so if you haven't seen that, then I'll leave a card up there. I think it should be on that side, and I'll link it in the description as well for you. So hopefully you'll find this video useful not only in your own practice if you are an actor, in terms of preparing scripts for performance, but also if these terms come up in a rehearsal or in a class or whatever, you know what people are talking about. So yeah, I hope you find this video helpful, and without further ado, let's get into it. Broadly speaking, units and beats are just a way to further break down the sections in a piece of playtext. So when you have a play, it's already broken down into different components. So it's broken down first into acts and then into scenes. From there, as an actor preparing your text, you can then break the scenes down into units and then break those units down into beats. The important things about units and beats specifically when it comes to us as actors and performers is that by the time you're getting down to smaller components like units and beats, we can then get to a point where we can make artistic choices and decisions about where beats and units fall and what they denote for our character or for the play as a whole. So they are a really useful tool in order to help you break down a text, in order to make decisions that serve your character and serve the overall story, which is why they are useful to know. Firstly, where do units fall? Because I'm sure if you've ever read a play text before, you've never seen units written in the text, and they're not. The smallest component that a play text will usually be divided into by the writer or the editor of that play text will be scenes. So how do you, as an actor preparing a piece of text, know where a new unit starts? In a play, every time a new act starts or a new scene starts, there is usually a shift. Units obviously aren't as dramatic because units occur within the same scene, but similarly, there is a shift in the character's actions, the character's motivations, what is driving the characters through the scenes. And there are two big indicators as to when that kind of shift is gonna happen. The first is entrances and exits. Whenever a character enters a scene or exits a scene, there is going to be a shift in the scene with the other characters that are there. So for example, if you have two characters having a conversation and a third character enters, that's automatically going to change the dynamic between now all three of the characters. The two characters who were talking, do they know this new person? Do they trust this new person? Is the new person more on one side than the other? Is there a change in status? Similarly, if you have two characters having a conversation and then one of those characters leaves, again, that's going to cause a shift. The character who remains, how do they react and behave differently when they're on their own compared to when they were with that other person? I can't actually think of an exception to the rule of an entrance or an exit is a new unit. So a great rule of thumb is if you see someone exiting or someone entering, that is a new unit. The second indicator of a major shift is the revelation of information. And this is something that can really depend on whether you're doing general uniting or character uniting, and we'll get onto the difference between those two in a second. Not all information is revelatory. Not all information is gonna cause a major shift. Sometimes information just builds on what has already been occurring before. So the information is just extending the unit you're already in. Other times the information completely shifts the scene and therefore it's the start of a new unit. Example, completely just made up in my head. Two people in a scene talking, their son is missing. In one version of this scene, maybe they already know that their son is officially missing. Maybe they've heard rumors that he ran away. The police are already involved. They're already on high alert. And during the scene, they find a letter from the son saying, I have run away. That information isn't wholly revelatory because the parents already know or suspect that he's run away. They're already worried. So rather than that being brand new information to them, it's just continuing the state and the mood that they're already in. So you could make the argument that that is not a new unit. Now let's say that in the scene he's not missing per se according to his parents, but he's just later than usual. He's usually home at 4. It's now 4:30. This is unlike him. This is a bit odd. Maybe he's gone round to a friend's house. We don't really know what's happening. And then they find the letter of him saying that he's run away. Now that is completely new information that's completely going to change the dynamic of the scene, because it's gone from has our son gone to a friend's house and that's why he's running late to he's run away and we have no idea where he is. So in that case, you could argue that it is a new unit. Now let's go back to general units versus character units. A general unit is a unit that is kind of neutral. So it's not from a particular character's perspective. It is just when a new unit begins. This is where, again, your entrances and exits are going to be pretty clear. Yes, for everyone involved, that's going to be a new unit. When it comes to information units, you might have to look more at what are the majority of characters, what state are they in? Is it a new unit for the majority of characters or for major characters? So in the main plot, the main actors in the plot, for them, is it a new unit? With character units, it's from your character's perspective, and sometimes different characters can have different units. To go back to our missing son example, let's just say it's not the two parents talking, but it's a group of people talking about this boy. Maybe he's late to a party. And let's say all of the characters just think he's running late, but one of the characters knows that he ran away. And let's also say that that character has the letter. And so that character knows that everyone else is about to find out that he's run away. So for every other character, the revelation of the letter is obviously novel information going to change how they move forward in the scene. For them, it is a new unit. For the character that already knows, they already know that the boy has run away. So that's not new information to them. They already know that the other characters are about to find out. So them finding out isn't going to be new information for them. The unit up to that point for them is them being like, oh, they're gonna find out, I'm gonna have to give them the letter so they know that their son has run away. And then them giving them the letter and everyone finding out is just a continuation of their character unit. In which case, their units are different, are shifted compared to everyone else's. Now, you could also argue that it's still a new unit, because you could argue that, well, yes, they know that the rest of the family are going to find out that this boy has run away, but those characters, once knowing that information, are going to act in a different way, and that's going to affect how the character who does know acts. So it's still going to be a new unit. And that is the beauty about being an actor and text work, is that it is up for interpretation. Is it a new unit for the character that knows? Is it not? There's no right or wrong answer, as long as whatever answer you as the performer, as the actor, comes to allows you to make decisions that best serve your character as written and best serve the story. Once you have your different units, best practice is to give those units a title. And this is a title that should be neutral, i.e. it should have nothing to do with what actions you might be playing, the emotional state of your character, etc. It's kind of like in some scripts, instead of having scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, etc., some playwrights will title their scenes. It's a similar thing. So if you're doing general uniting, it will be a general title. So you might have to mention some character names if, you know, they are the main characters that are involved. But again, it shouldn't be from the perspective of one character or another, and the language should be very neutral. Going back to the runaway child analogy, if the first unit is the parents talking about how their son is late, the general unit title for that would be something along the lines of Parent A and Parent B discuss how their son is late from school. Discussing is pretty neutral. There's no kind of opinion on the lateness. He is just late. That is what he is. He's late from school. A character title unit, let's say you're playing Parent B, would be something like Parent B discusses with Parent A why their son is late from school. Now, you might think there's not much of a difference there, but Parent B is like the focus of the title, so it's from their perspective. The reason you want the unit titles to be neutral is because the units are there regardless of what you're playing. So Parent B might be angry at Parent A, Parent B might be really worried about their child, Parent B might be really nonchalant about the fact that their child is late. That is all up to you as the actor, but whatever that acting choice is, the unit is still the same. So you don't want to put anything on the unit title because then it still gives you scope to change how you play the unit. If you were to say something like Parent B argues with Parent A about why their son is late, you've immediately put yourself in a situation of like, well, this unit needs to be argumentative because the title is saying argue, when it doesn't necessarily have to be. So to summarize, units are the next smallest component after scenes. They can either be character-based units or general units, and they are usually almost always defined by characters entering or exiting, or characters receiving revelatory information that causes a shift in their actions, in their motivations, in their emotional state within the scene. Before we start on beats, I just want to clarify a little thing that I misspoke in my previous actions video. I said that you could unit a speech. There may be times where you can unit a speech, but usually a whole speech will be within a single unit or a unit within itself. I didn't mean uniting a speech, I meant beats in a speech. So what is a beat? A beat, again, indicates some kind of shift, but on an even smaller level than uniting. The best way I can describe it is a shift in focus or a shift of intention within your character. So what kind of shifts denote a beat? I'm going to focus on monologues and speeches for this because I think A, that's the clearest examples, and B, it's where using beats can be the most helpful in my opinion. Let's go back to our example of the boy who's run away, and let's say the character who knew the whole time is now being bombarded with questions by the rest of the family. And so that character gives a speech in which they explain what happened. And maybe part of that speech is them explaining what happened. Maybe part of the speech would be them explaining how they feel, how it was really hard for them to have to keep it a secret. Maybe it's them accusing the family, saying you drove him away. He's been wanting to do this for a while and you pushed him over the edge. That's just 3 examples of different aspects of the speech, different things that the character can touch on in their speech. These 3 things are tackling different issues, different reasons for why what's happened has happened. Arguably, those different parts of the speech could be different beats. The beat about this is actually what happened, the beat about how I'm feeling about it, and the beat about it's actually your guys' fault. Again, this is up for interpretation. Some actors might say that this is how I feel about it and it's your fault are actually within the same beat because the whole beat is about it's not my fault, it's yours. Other people might have that as 2 separate beats because this is how I'm feeling, it's got nothing to do with you, this is how I'm feeling, you need to understand this, but also it's your fault. And these things can shift as you get more familiar with a piece of text as well. That's okay too. There's no right or wrong answer as long as it helps you get to the performance that you want that serves your character and serves the story. Now, sometimes, especially if you're looking at really dense text or things like Shakespeare where the language is quite difficult, it can be hard to intuit where the changes in beats lie, because it's not written in your own vernacular, in language that you normally use or understand. Maybe the situation is a bit more complicated than the example I've described. maybe the shifts are just way more subtle. In which case, there are some technical things within the writing that you can also look for to give you an indication of where different beats might be. And a lot of it is again to do with changes, seeing changes in how your character is speaking essentially. So things like, do they go from speaking in really short sentences to really long sentences, or vice versa? Do they go from using really short words to really long words, or vice versa? Do they go from speaking in questions to speaking in statements, or vice versa? All of these shifts in how your character's speech is written and formatted can be an indication of maybe there is a shift in focus, a shift of intention in my character within this speech that I can call a beat and exploit it for that. A really good example of this, real life example, is in Act 3, Scene 1 of The Comedy of Errors, where Luciana has a speech right at the beginning where she's telling off the man she thinks is her sister's husband for being unfaithful and not being nice to her sister. Her first 3 sentences are all questions, and then she goes into statements. So that shift from her speaking in questions to then speaking in statements is a beat change. I marked it as a beat because I did the play in the summer. So that can be a really good starting point, again, especially with things like Shakespeare, things where the language is a bit more dense. If you're struggling to really intuit where those shifts are, that can be a really good thing to look out for. It's important to note that that doesn't mean that every time your character suddenly asks a question, that's necessarily a beat change. You want to look for like clusters. So if there's been like a chunk where they've been speaking in questions and then suddenly they're not, or there's a chunk where they've been speaking in really long words and then suddenly they're speaking in really short words, then that is an indication of a shift. But again, this is all down to interpretation, and as long as you can justify what the shift is and why it's there and translate that text work into performance that serves the character and serves the scene, it's all good. So to summarize beats, beats are sections of a character's text where there is a shift in focus or intention, but not a shift that's great enough to signal a whole new unit. They're still going towards the same thing, they're still acting in the same mode and mood, but there are just subtle shifts in the tactics that they're using or where they're putting their focus within the situation. Let's start with uniting. General uniting is really useful just to get a full, thorough understanding of the trajectory of a play, an act, a scene. It really helps break down what is happening and how all of those pieces fit together to create drama, which is what we do in theatre. We do drama. Not annoying like internet drama, like entertaining drama that is, you know, sometimes thought-provoking, but mostly entertaining. General uniting is really, really good, especially if you're new to uniting, new to textual analysis. It is a really, really useful tool, especially if you're playing maybe smaller characters or characters that are in more of a subplot than the main plot, for you to really see where the attention of the play as a whole should be, so that you don't upstage people, for example. We don't need to upstage. We can just let our light shine and give that light to the story and where it needs to be for the audience. So it's really useful for that. In terms of character uniting, it's really useful, I think, to allow you to remember what else is going on. Kind of similar to general uniting, but more how it pertains to your character. It can be really easy when you're preparing a character, preparing a text, to just think about, this is my character arc and this is what I'm doing and this is what my character wants, etc. And you forget that, well, in this scene, this person's come into the room and then this person's come into the room and then this person's gone, and it might not have a big effect, but it will have an effect on your character. So I personally think character uniting can help make you more aware of the world you're in and more aware of, this is actually new information for my character. No one else in the scene cares, but for my character, this is new and important information that has changed something about how they're gonna go forward. It makes sure that you don't skip over those things. In terms of beats, I don't really use beats in terms of dialogue. I feel like in dialogue, it is more of a back and forth, and the kind of natural shifts of beating can usually come out naturally as you play a scene. But in monologues, in speeches, when you have a big chunk of text, it's just really useful for not being monotone. And I don't mean monotone in terms of like your voice literally being monotone, but being one note, just playing one thing, especially if it's a speech where on the surface it feels like you're just saying the same thing over and over again in different ways, or if it's a speech, again, going back to Shakespeare, or kind of denser texts where if you didn't do the text work, you would just be like, well, I know they're talking about this thing, so I guess I'll just play the action that I think this thing requires. It allows you to actually see those shifts and feel those shifts, which is really, really important, especially when it's coming to things like auditions, where the last thing you want to come across as is one note. You want to show not only that you can look at a piece of text and make it interesting and entertaining, but also it gives you more of an opportunity to show the full range of what you can do if you find all of that color and texture in a piece of text. You know, finding the juicy bits as well, because it's juicy when you can find those differences and you can change things and you can really play those shifts. And you may find when you're preparing a monologue that you don't need to beat it because it all seems to be there on the page. Or you might find that, you know, in a play, you're such a small part that you're like, I'm just in the one general unit, so I don't really need to unit anything because I come on as the messenger, say my message, and then go off again. And that's fine. It's your process, but also I think uniting and beating is a really useful tool to have in your kit of actors' tools. Because when you do get that speech that is really, really dense and you're like, I have no idea what's going on and I have no idea how to make this interesting because I don't know what's going on. Or when you get that really complicated script where you're like, people are just coming in and coming out and I feel like I'm just about treading water. I don't know what's important to my character. I don't know what's not. This just seems to be a lot of stuff going on. Literally sitting down with a pencil and being like, right, a new character has entered, so that is a new unit. They've gone from talking in statements to asking questions, so that's clearly a shift. Literally doing that, and then at least you know where those shifts are, so you can then be like, okay, so in this little chunk what's happening, in this little chunk what's happening, what can I play to show the difference between those two things? Do you see what I mean? It just makes it easier because you're not having to try and like hope that something good comes out on the spot. You know where the shifts are, you just have to figure out what to play to show those shifts. So that is my video explaining uniting and beats. I hope you found it useful and that you can take this information forth for the next time you're having to prepare a text for performance or for audition. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Would love to have you on the channel. Come on down. We have a great time uniting and actioning and beating and doing all of the things so that we live our best actory life doing our best work. Yeah. That's why we do it. Stay tuned for more theatre content from a UK perspective, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye, friends!